What's up guys, for this video I'm going to be doing something a little bit more different. Instead of my usual live gameplay commentaries, I'm going to give you guys 5 tips on how to escape low elo and how I do it every time. I am saying low elo, and by that I mean like gold, high gold and below, so the silver, bronze, all that kind of stuff. Do know that these tips require some basic game knowledge, and you will not improve by using these tips unless you are committed to trying them out in your own games. Yeah, that's basically it, so let's get into tip number 1. So the very first tip that I'm going to give you guys is to know your matchups. What I exactly mean by this is that you have to identify before the game even starts if you are stronger than the enemy jungle in terms of duo potential. So that means if you can 1v1 the enemy jungler or not, if you outgank the enemy jungler or not, or if you simply outscale. You have to know all these things to set up a game plan before the game starts. For example, if you're playing Karthus, a weak early game jungler that wants to full clear, scale up, get his golden XP, get his level 6 and just keep scaling into the late game. So if you're playing the Karthus against a champion like Lee Sin or Kindred, like a more early game focused champion, you should know that you're gonna lose every 1v1 early game playing Karthus. So you just want to scale up, avoid the enemies at all costs. Doesn't matter if you have to give up scuttles for that, you're just gonna lose the 1v1, so don't even try to do that. But if you're playing the Lee Sin in this matchup or the Kindred, you want to pressure the Karthus, not let him free farm, not let him scale up for free. So what I mean by that is just try to invade him as much as possible, take away scams, he'll have a lot less golden XP, and just try to kill him over and over. So that will be kind of useless and it will take him a long time to scale. So yeah, take away all of that and then you'll be fine. Another example is if you're playing a champion that wants to get his level 6, like Evelyn is a good example, Rengar. Those two champs are really only good at ganks when they have their level 6, so I would not recommend trying to gank before level 6. And the game plan, for example, against a gank heavy champion, like Jarvan looks to hyper gank, Xin Zhao too, is to just try to read his pathing, the enemy junglers. Try to identify on which buff they started. You can typically do that by just looking at the side lanes. If they arrive late to lane, you'll know that the enemy jungler started on that side of the map. If they use mana, it's a good indication too. And warn your teammates of where they are going to path next. That all of this just has to do with playing a lot against the champion, maybe you playing the champion that you're against, so you'll know what pathing he does, and then you can just ping your teammates back if you know he's around and that kind of stuff. And on these types of champions like Evelyn and Rengar, I will not recommend trying to counter gank or doing something about the hyper gank enemy champion, because it will most likely not work out in your favor. You'll most likely feed a double kill. So just hyper farm and just try to scale up, try to get your level 6 as fast as possible and then gank. And my biggest advice I can give you on how to learn the matchups is, as I just said, to play a bunch, play the champs that interest you. Also, a good tip is to play the champions that you don't have a lot of success against. So you'll know their pathing, you'll know where they are, and you can read their pathing much easier. And another good tip is to watch videos about the champions you want to learn more about. So reading the enemy jungler's pathing correctly leads into tip number 2. The second thing you have to think about after starting a match is the enemy jungler's pathing. The first step to doing this is successfully is to know on what camp they started. This is easily doable since you can look at your minimap and see which of the two side lanes, either top or bot, arrive late to their lane, or you can check if any of the two side lanes used any mana. The side lane that did both or one of these things will have leashed the enemy jungler, so at this point you know on what buff the enemy jungler started. Now you have to determine where he's going to go next. There is a very nice ward you can place on the enemy raptors to spot out where the jungler is pathing towards, as shown in the video. If he skips raptors, you and your team will know since you saw him or her walk past them. From this point you have to assume that is what he's going to do next. This has to do with knowing your matchups. If the enemy is playing something like Elise or Jarvan, you should know that these two champions want to get at level 3 as fast as possible and want to gank as fast as possible. Jarvan and maybe Xin Zhao can even gank at level 2, so you have to keep your eye out for that. But the fastest route to get level 3 is buff Gromp. That is on the bottom of the map, so the blue side of the map. On the red side of the map there will be blue, Gromp, red. But if you can identify this, you can warn your teammates and play accordingly. If the enemy jungle is playing something like Evelynn, Karthus or Echo, you should know that these champions either want level 6 to gank or they want to scale, which means they will fully clear their jungle as much as possible. In this case, a lot of these picks will show at the ward that you will have placed at the enemy raptors, and you can assume that they will move over to wolves, then buff, and then to gromp. So tip number 3 is going to be to stick to a small champion pool. Don't try to play a bit of everything. This way you will never or very slowly get good at one champion, and to climb fast it's recommended to play like 3, maybe 4 champions. What I would recommend is 1 AD champion, 1 AP champion, and if you don't mind playing tanks, learn 1 good tank, but mostly just try to play something that deals damage in this elo so you can solo carry. Champions that are very strong at the moment for AD are picks like Lee Sin, Olaf and Warwick. For AP I would recommend playing Echo, Evelynn, and if you're looking for something a bit more challenging, Elise, but I would highly recommend sticking to Echo and Evelynn. Evelynn especially, because in this elo a lot of people can be often found out of position, and with Evelynn you're invisible, so you can sneak behind them and one-shot them because you're an assassin after all. And for a tank, I think you should try out Zac. He skills super well, he's extremely tanky late game, kind of unkillable, and he has very strong early ganks. Tip number 4 is going to be that you have to identify your win conditions. Before the game starts, you have to look at your team and the enemy team and identify, mostly in the lanes, who is stronger than who, so who counters who will win 1v1s. For example, if you have a Talon mid facing against a Kassadin, you want to prioritize that lane as much as possible pre-6, since Kassadin is very immobile pre-6, and Talon is very strong into Kassadin because he's a lane bully after all. An assassin has a lot of burst damage, bleed, ignite, so just prioritize that lane, deny the Kassadin the scaling. Another example can be if you have a Draven against a Vayne, so a pretty strong early game champion which is Draven against a Vayne that wants to scale up and farm. Another example of that can be Kai'Sa. Try to gank bot as much as possible, since Vayne wants to scale, as I said. Draven wants to fight to stack up his passive, get the gold. So help your bot lane fight and deny the enemy Vayne her scaling and all her gold and XP. And yeah, that's basically it for the examples. So just know what lanes are or can be stronger than the enemy by your ganks. Another tip that I can give you is in this elo to spam gank. In lower elo, people overstep and will overstay in their lanes a lot of the times. So just try to spam gank, get your team ahead. The enemy jungler won't know what to do most of the times in this elo. They'll just get flamed, and that usually results into a win. Win conditions can also be objectives like Dragon and Baron. Try to always play around bot side when Dragon is up. It doesn't really matter what Dragon it is, because after all it's pretty free stats if you can get it. If you see a free kill top, you can go for it, or if you have a losing bot side and you don't feel comfortable about winning a fight, then try to prioritize your top lane, get your top laner ahead. Giving up Drakes is not the worst thing that can happen, but in this elo typically you don't want to do that. But if you have to, prioritize your top lane, go kill the enemy top. Take, for example, the Herald, spawn it top, get the plates, maybe even dive the top laner again, and that will you'll trade objectives, which is what you want to look for in every game. Always trade objectives. Tip number 5 has everything to do with your first clear. The first clear is very important. Always try to start with your bot side, since it will give a much better leash than your top side. This will result in you being more healthy in your jungle, and you will clear faster than the enemy maybe. In lower elo, I've experienced that games are often decided in the early game. If you can or want to learn some early game champions, like Lee Sin is a very strong pick. He has extremely high amount of early game damage and duel potential. There's not a whole lot of champions that can stand up to his damage, maybe something like an Olaf can, but it's a very strong pick. Olaf is also pretty good early game. But if you want to play something AP, I would recommend Elise. There aren't a lot of AP champions that are strong in the early game. Elise is almost the only one, but she is a bit more challenging, so you have to have a bit more game knowledge and understand the champion a bit more. That all just comes with playing a lot of the champion and being interested in learning her. Same goes for Kindred. She is a pretty strong early game jungler, especially in lower elo. She works a lot better than high. If you're experienced with Kindred and know your matchups, you can often win the early game by invading them and that kind of stuff. With all these early game picks, I would recommend doing the buff into Grom clear, or if you are on the other side of the jungle, you can do the blue gromp red clear. They will give you the fastest level 3, and you can look to either gank the nearby side lanes before the enemy jungler is even done with their first clear, or if the opportunity doesn't present itself, you can invade the enemy at his last buff. This clear into early invade can let you snowball super hard. You will kill the enemy jungler, setting him or her behind in XP and levels. Take away his buff, that will lead into more snowball. And after that you can gank one of the side lanes, since you will most likely be behind them. And in this elo, the side lanes usually don't even react to the invade, so it's a very strong strategy. You can see it a lot in my videos. I do it almost every game in this elo. So those are gonna be the 5 tips that I can give you on how to escape low elo. It works every time for me. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time.